If you're a firm working with the government sector, you're going to want to tune into this. In episodes 1 and 2, we covered the wake-up call and the process shift needed for government contractors. Now in episode 3, we're going to focus on the path forward, such as technical and business assessments, tech architecture, data strategies, as well as change leadership needed to have a truly successful transformation. Let's start the countdown. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Delaware, North America, and Capital Edge LinkedIn live stream. We are broadcasting to you live from LinkedIn as well as YouTube. My name is Fanny Dunnigan, and thank you for tuning in. For those of you that are joining us, please be sure to introduce yourselves in the comments of the feed. This series is called the Government Transformation Series. This is episode 3, where we talk about the tech leap. And feel free to comment and share your questions and feedback as we go through this show. And feel free to connect with each other in the comments as well. This is a great chance to network and introduce yourselves as well. And let us know where you're tuning in from. We would love to see where everyone is here in the live stream. But to kick things off, I want to introduce you to our list of expert panelists here today, starting with Kenneth Berg. He is our partner here at Delaware North America. Ken, welcome to the show. Can you introduce a little bit of yourself to our audience?
Yeah, thank you, Fanny. Very excited to be here. Ken Berg. I've been doing this aerospace and defense SAP contracting thing for about 23 plus years. Came out of the Royal Norwegian Air Force and jumped over to industry and the government contracting side, and primarily focused on delivery of SAP implementations in the government contracting space and commercial space. So very good to meet you, and I'm excited to have this discussion here.
Awesome. Thank you, Ken. And then we have Chad Braley from Capital Edge. He's the CEO there. Welcome, Chad. Please share a little bit about yourself and your experience with government contracting.
Certainly, Fanny. Good to be back with you and the team here. I think we're going to have a good next 30 to 45 minutes. So Chad Braley, I'm the CEO and founder at Capital Edge Consulting, which is a consulting firm that strategically focuses on helping companies do business with the United States government. And as you can imagine, there's a lot of changes in that. In my 25 years plus of doing this, this has probably been the year of the most change and also the most uncertainty. So, but anything, compliance related, ERP transformation, really full project lifecycle consulting and especially helping commercial companies in today's space kind of navigate the myriad of requirements that come with the opportunities that they're looking to pursue to expand their business as the government, in the current administration kind of shifts their direction and their path and how they want to buy goods and services moving forward. So very interesting times, very happy to be here, and I'll kick it back to you.
Absolutely. Thank you. I also want to introduce to you Albin Leung. He is one of our principal architects here at Delaware. Albin, please share a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Thanks, Fanny. So I'm Albin. I'm a principal architect here at Delaware with over 20 years in the SAP space. I originally came from Malaysia and I was, started off as an offshore ABAP developer and kind of worked myself through the different projects and so on. And I've been here now in the States for about 13 to 14 years now.
Awesome. Welcome, Alvin. And then on the Capital Edge side, we have Melissa Dixon. She's one of the senior managers at Capital Edge. Melissa, please share a bit about yourself and your experience with government contracting.
Thank you, Fanny, and thank you so much to everybody for attending. My background's in electrical engineering, and I started out my career in the fast-paced fiber optic telecommunications startup world. And then I moved to a government contractor who had strong applied technology and a national lab footprint. And over time, I moved from the client-facing side of that business to IT, where I developed deep expertise in enterprise systems, data architecture, and government compliance requirements. And so today I bring those combined strengths to Capital Edge's processes and systems group. And I connect compliance best practices with effective ERP design inputs and process optimization. So again, thanks for having me here, and I'll turn it back to you, Fanny.
Happy to have you here, Melissa. And then last but not least, the core of a lot of ERP systems data. I want to welcome David Sentence to our feed here, our live stream. He is the data architect at Delaware. David, please share a little bit about your career.
Yeah, sure. So I've been in the SAP data space now for way too long, 25 plus years, very much focused on data migration, data quality, data governance. I have worked in the UK. As you may tell, my Texas accent is not natural. I worked in government organizations for a good 15 years over in the UK, and I've done work over here in the US with US Army. And for a period of time, I did a lot of audits and compliance reviews for a number of organizations, including government organizations here in the USA. I'm happy to give you some of my knowledge around data and how it may apply in this very interesting space as we go forward.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much. So for those of you that may be tuning in for the first time, just want to share a little bit about what we've covered already. This is actually part 3 of a 3-part series. In episode 1 of this government contracting transformation series, we kind of discussed the wake-up call, the pain points, the existing challenges of government contracting, the cost of doing nothing, and adopting that wait and see mode, which is kind of harming quite a few organizations, and then the ROI of getting ahead. And then episode 2, we talked about the process shift, right? Nothing can really change without the business changing or processes being updated. So how outdated processes in procurement, pricing, compliance are slowing contractors down, and then how to make operations more flexible and ready for change. Right? So finally, in this part 3 of this series, we're going to talk about the technology side of things, the tech leap that is necessary. So we're going to cover 5 areas here today. Number 1, the business drivers behind the tech and data needs. Number 2, phase 0 assessments, right? You don't want to jump into an implementation without doing that ROI case study. Number 3, the technical and data architecture. Number 4, change management and user adoption, because we can't get anything done without the people involved as well. And then give you very specific use cases and case studies. So that's kind of an overview of the agenda. The first thing I really want to start with is the business drivers, right? So I'm going to look to Chad. Chad, you have a great quote that I've always remembered, and you always say, "Don't let the tail wag the dog," right? What do you mean by that, and why is that so important when it comes to kind of looking at the business needs before we jump straight to the tech?
Well, first of all, Fanny, I'm just excited that somebody actually remembered something that I said and was able to repurpose it. But you're right. I mean, so with that comment, like, don't let the tail wag the dog, it is, especially I think in the current environment and everything we're working on getting close to having a National Defense Authorization Act for 2026. We've seen a flood of executive orders from the administration. We've seen the revolutionary FAR overhaul, which was far from revolutionary, and then we're probably going to have a non-revolutionary overhaul, if you will, to some of the agency supplemental regulations. But the mantra, right, of the current administration is we want to contract quicker, right? We want speed to acquisition. We need products and services in the hands of, the warfighter, next month, not 5 years from now. And I think so much of that, and so much of our client portfolio is really primarily commercial companies who also want to do business with the U.S. government, right? And that may be substantial from a revenue perspective, 2, 3, 4, 500 million, $1 billion, but it may be somewhat inconsequential to the larger, $20 billion organization or $40 billion organization, right? Or however big they may be. And understanding that we still have, and I think there's a misperception, right, that all this regulation is going away, and it's really not going away. But there is a focus and a push, right, to procure more from a commercial standpoint, right, and commercial items and commercial services. And so you have these underlying compliance requirements that you still have to deal with that have significant ramifications if we can't get there, but yet we can't necessarily change and aren't going to change, and it doesn't make sense to change the larger 90% commercial business just to handle the 10% of the compliance requirements, even though those are very important. So really understanding the business drivers to how you establish and set up your tech to help meet those without burdening the larger organization with these additional requirements that quite frankly just don't apply to their purely commercial contracts. And so I think really understanding, and we see companies, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more as we go, really struggling with that and or kind of forcing this business into, let's say, the existing system, which is driven and set up to be a commercial platform. And therefore, then you start to create, a lot of potential manual processes or custom configurations, which have different downstream ramifications as you want to upgrade and as you want to, change and modify things. So, the other term, and I'll probably use this again when we get to some of the later sections, is really looking at this from a standpoint of, anytime you have IT transformation and changing needs from an ERP infrastructure perspective, it really has to be evaluated as a business project, not just an IT project, because you can, if you do good diligence and kind of laying out those business needs, you can solve a lot of those problems with the capabilities of the tech that's available and save yourself a lot of time without letting the tail wag the dog and burdening, the rest of the business with that. But you have to spend you don't have to spend a lot of time. You just have to spend a little bit of time, right? Actually planning and thinking through that, so that, you don't have kind of landmines that you're driving over downstream.
For sure. And you bring us so many good points. But I think what really sticks out, right, is just to reinforce the fact that it's a business project, not just an IT project. And then that speed to market, right, being able to contract faster. I want to turn my attention to Melissa now. Melissa, you obviously Capital Edge works a lot with government contractors, but what usually triggers a organization to reach out to you guys and to start that conversation and to evaluate their tech and their business landscape?
I really love this question because we've actually spent some time asking ourselves this and paying attention. What brings clients in and what problems are they facing? And so I want to start with external factors and move into internal factors. But external factors that can be, leading indicators of needing a new ERP might be audit and risks that a company might see with an upcoming audit or, looking on the horizon and into the future. Similarly, cybersecurity risks, CMMC, data risks, and anything that they see there with their business that might be of concern. Changing customer expectations is another one. So the need for faster delivery, better reporting, a better customer experience. Those are times when we hear from customers. If the system's at the end of life and going out of support soon, that's an external factor beyond their control. They may not have been thinking about a new system, even though maybe they should have been, but that's certainly a time we hear from customers. Keeping up with competition and the industry, markets are shifting, things are moving quickly. And then finally, and this is an important one, mergers and acquisitions. They may need to start looking at consolidating systems for consolidating reporting. And then there's some internal factors. Maybe the business is really prospering and they need more scalability with their ERP. The need for updated functionality to keep up with the pace of doing business. They want to take advantage of automation and AI and analytics capabilities, faster decision making. There might be an internal digital transformation initiative going on that would create an opportunity for new systems. There may be a need for improved reporting and analytics, as I mentioned, and cost cutting, things to reduce the number of software packages and all the sprawl, or the need for operational efficiency. And so, during a downturn, sometimes companies do try to cut costs and protect the core. And other companies tend to want to improve operational efficiency and use the opportunity to invest in new systems and processes. And so companies can really come out of potential downturns in business stronger because of a more efficient operating model with, as I mentioned, automation, AI-driven analytics, digital supply chain tools, enhanced customer experience, and reduced operating costs. So those are some of the things that we see our customers really thinking about when they come to us.
Yeah. Thank you, Melissa. I love how you broke down like the internal factors as well as the external factors. There's definitely a lot to consider. I'm going to turn to Ken now, right? Because Ken, I was reading an article recently from CIO.com, right? And there's a quote from there that I would love for you to address, right? Because it said 95% of CIOs say that making an ROI case for a newer SAP cloud ERP solution is difficult, right? Or it takes significant effort. And most are focused on carefully assessing the best path forward within the SAP ecosystem. Right. And so it can be a monumental task. So then it can seem very overwhelming. What are your suggestions for that? How does Delaware handle that objection and that challenge?
Yeah, we've spent quite a bit of time talking to our customers and understanding what they need in this space. And obviously, from a solution integration partner, we want to get in as early as possible to help shape that picture. So we've and it's a pretty common term, but we've come up with these phase zero assessments. So we have a very structured and short approach to help customers through a methodology and through a set of activities, really build a business case and understand the value they can get out of an ERP and an SAP transformation. They're very short, they're very structured, and you cover all the areas from people, process, and technology perspective. And it gives you a detailed report at the end of it that shows you your organizational readiness, your technology readiness, in terms of what you need to do and the complexity of it all. And we weave in a benefits realization and value analysis to that, which serve two purposes. It allows you to build your investment case for what it actually would entail and cost to move to a modern ERP system. And it helps solidify the scope and the sheer load of what you had to embark on. And the second part is it gives you those measures, those target measures that you can really bring forward and track through your transformation journey to understand that you actually get the value realization that you intended to have. So it's a relatively low cost investment where you bring in an external party to help you through an objective process. Which is something that unlocks a little bit of the challenge that these companies often try to do this by themselves, and they're trying to figure it out by themselves. But when you bring someone like Capital Edge or Delaware in, we can help you through a structured approach. And a softer benefit of that is actually that it kickstarts and triggers the organization, and very often you get these smaller initiatives that spin off a phase zero. That helps improve and helps create value ahead of starting a larger transformation project.
Yeah, thank you, Ken. How long does a phase 0 assessment usually take?
It depends on the size of the organization. It can take as short as 3 weeks for a mid-sized organization, and it can take as long as 9 weeks or 12 weeks if you have a sizable enterprise and you need to cover a lot of ground. So we tailor that to the complexity and the size of the organization.
Right, but definitely worthwhile so that
100%.
everybody knows exactly what to expect going in and costs, resources, especially.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, and potential paths to a modern ecosystem, whether you want to do a technical migration of legacy system, whether you do a so-called greenfield and transformation and re-engineering of your business, and other sort of variations of the migration path.
Right. Okay. I want to dive a little deeper here, because government contractors, they also kind of have to balance the business needs, right? Staying agile, nimble, adaptable to all these changing political climates and compliance. What would be kind of like the technical constraints, though? Because there are some technical constraints from legacy systems moving to the cloud. How would you what advice would you have to kind of manage that balance?
It's a daunting task to embark on these things, and I think it goes back to what we spoke about in earlier episodes, which you got to think about the cost of not doing something, and fundamentally what you have to do is you have to get yourself on a platform that reduces technical debt. A lot of the GovCon parties that we work with have spent decades customizing and tailoring the solutions to meet their business, and it builds this rigidity into their ecosystem that makes them inflexible and slow to move. So reducing technical debt from custom code or from getting out of hosted on-premise solutions where you're managing infrastructure and all those things, you got to get out of that business and center your innovation on your products and services, and not put your innovation and investments into building a unique procure-to-pay process within your organization. That's not where your value differentiation is going to come from. So I think really focusing on reducing technical debt, get yourselves out of the business of customizing ERP systems and hosting ERP systems is what you should be doing.
Right. Having that kind of hybrid model.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I want to pause at this point to share a quick video with our audience, giving you an overview of the Capital Edge consulting firm. Let's play that right now.
Capital Edge is your full-service solution to navigating the compliance complexities present in the highly regulated U.S. government contracts industry. As the world's largest independent consulting firm focused solely on the U.S. government contracting and grant compliance market, we bring the best-in-class capabilities, knowledge, and perfected solutions to provide you the assurance and confidence needed to handle business-as-usual challenges to overcoming worst-case scenarios affecting your federal business.
We can bring tailored solutions that may be outside of your thought process or things you haven't come across before, because we've seen it done so many different ways, and we've seen it done in a lot of ways that aren't necessarily correct, right? So we also understand what not to do.
Our team is deeply passionate about the success of our clients and have earned the reputation of delivering more for less using low-risk, built-for-purpose, tailored solutions performed on a best value price basis. That combination is simply not available from other consulting firms. In close partnership with your internal team, your project will be managed and performed by top experts in the federal acquisition compliance field, with client-specific project objectives achieved and overall customer satisfaction paramount.
Our clients are friends, ultimately. They are colleagues, they are peers, they are, in many cases, lifelong connections. On a personal level and of course at the business level.
Capital Edge saves you time, money, and illuminates for you what otherwise could be unforeseen compliance landmines. Capital Edge knows the importance of having close personal connections with our valued experts and your personnel. Having long-tenured staff and equally as long-tenured client relationships, our sense of family permeates everything we do. In addition to delivering more public training than any other firm providing U.S. government contract and grants compliance consulting, Capital Edge also provides customized in-house training and workshop-based learning to our clients. We're ready to roll up our sleeves for you. Let's discuss how our experts can provide you the edge needed to navigate the regulatory and contractual complexities of doing business with the federal government while continuing to propel your business forward.
We want our clients to know and to feel that their success is our main focus. And should the need arise, Capital Edge will always be there to help our clients navigate the complexities of doing business with the federal government.
Okay, well, as you can see, feel free to reach out to Capital Edge as well. I want to kind of dive a little deeper now into the technical side of it. Let's kind of get deep and tactical. And I'm going to start with Albin. Albin, you're a technical architect, right? And there's obviously a lot of different requirements around that. Help us understand better for government contractors. They need that flexibility of the cloud, but also they have very strict security and compliance kind of standards. And at the same time, can you break down the difference between public and private cloud and a lot of the terms that we hear, like grow and rise in the SAP ecosystem? And then when a company might need something like SAP NS2. Let's kind of dive deep into those things.
Sure. Thanks, Fanny. Yeah, I mean, I think we all agree, right? So government contractors today face a tough balancing act. They need to stay agile. There's this need for speed in cloud deployments, access to like the latest innovations with AI and automation, while they need to also meet strict compliance requirements like CMMC, ITAR, and Zero Trust, right? So before we dive deep into like what a hybrid architecture looks like, so like Fanny mentioned, let's talk about the SAP's two main cloud options, right? Fanny, can you pull up the slide? Yeah, thank you. So there are two main ERP options, commonly referred to as Grow and Rise with SAP. And first of all, the Grow with SAP, which is the public cloud, it's SAP's multi-tenant SaaS offering, right? It's fast, it's cost-effective, it's great for standardized processes, and it's perfect for global commercial operations. So Ken spoke a little bit about technical debt earlier, and we're not in the business of customizing every single processes, and this public cloud offering is perfect for that, right? So think of like a drone manufacturer selling to worldwide, right? So you get the rapid innovation that SAP invests in, like with AI and automation, plus the scalability. But there's a catch. This public cloud doesn't support ITAR or classified data, and customization is a little bit limited because it follows more of a fit to standard approach. Okay, so on the other side of the offering is what we call Rise with SAP, a private cloud environment. So this is a single tenant environment. It gives you more flexibility and customization, but we still recommend something called SAP's Clean Core Guidelines so that upgrades in this environment doesn't become a nightmare in the future, right? So private cloud offers more control, but it's higher cost and typically a little slower to adopt new features compared to the public cloud. And last but not least, right, so we talk about SAP NS2. So what is NS2, right? If you're doing government work, compliance is non-negotiable, right? So you have to comply to the work or you go to jail, right? So your system has to be hosted in a secure enclave like the SAP NS2, or another hosting option would be like Microsoft GCC, which stands for, I think, Government Community Cloud, right? So these environments meet the US regulations for ITAR, CMMC, and FedRAMP. Now, so if you handle federal contracts, and you have classified bill of materials or ITAR controlled data, hosting your system in NS2 is essential, almost like non-negotiable, right? So because it is US-based, it's operated by cleared personnel, and it ensures compliance with defense and export control rules. So what's the reality for government contractors? if you just lift and shift your entire business and drop it into the NS2 environment, it may be too costly, right? So you don't want to do that because you're not paying a lot of money for unnecessarily security and so on and so forth. So the hybrid model is where government contracts is going to need both, right? So take for example, right, that same drone manufacturer may run its commercial division in the public cloud, and they can go global, right? So they can do business out of Vietnam, Malaysia, China, anywhere else, right? While its federal division that deals with the U.S. government contracts will use a private cloud in NS2 for security and compliance, right? So the hybrid model or the architecture here, we're not really talking about servers or locations. It's really about the data, right? So my colleague David will dive deeper into that in a moment. But architecturally, bottom line, you'll have commercial data in public cloud for innovation, speed, and best practice. And then you have sovereign data, where you do your government contracts in a private cloud for security and compliance. And Chad, I don't want to call you out right now, but I think in our last conversation, you do have some sort of like an example where a customer of yours, was looking at these hybrid cloud sort of environment.
Yeah. And there was some cost savings your story had, Chad.
No, and it's a very interesting situation, right? So they, you kind of teed it up perfectly, right?
Yeah.
Large commercial company, right, who has kind of ventured into the government contracting space with not enough revenue to let the tail wag the dog, right? But yet at the same time is really struggling with, the value and the ROI. And to me, the ROI is very clear of let's carve out this piece of the business. Let's carve out this piece of the system so that we can meet all these requirements and secure it instead of paying. The estimate is around $4 million in annual additional cost to be in, a GCC moderate to high cloud and or NS2 for the entire business, because they're saying, well, it's expensive to carve this out. Well, it's a one-time CapEx expense that we can recover through the rates. But if I'm going to save, if my $4 million number becomes, goes down by $3 million for the next 5 years, there's $15 million in savings, right there. So yes, I have some one-time, but kind of looking at that bigger picture. And I don't know if it's, we're going to talk about this a little bit more, but it's, when companies go out and they, acquire different businesses and just want to force them into their infrastructure without necessarily understanding the business needs, to your point earlier, right? CMMC's just beginning. It's not going away, right? These security requirements. So you have to understand those, or you put yourself in a position to spend significantly more dollars because I have to now secure it all because I'm unwilling to have, some level of segregation and spend a little bit of time and money. I'm not saying it's an inconsequential investment, because it is real money, to really separate and kind of enclave that out to protect what you need to protect, but again, not, subject the rest of the business to the same level of scrutiny and security.
Yeah. Short-term pain for those long-term gains, right? Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, thank you for adding into that, Chad, and thank you for that clear explanation, Albin. Well, from technical architecture, we obviously also have to talk about data strategy and data architecture. David, from your perspective as a data architect, right? Can you share an overview of what government contractors need to consider around ITAR, data compliance, data governance, strategy, all that when it comes to these kind of multi-tenant cloud architectures?
Sure, Fanny. Sure, Fanny. Happy to do so. So I think, as everybody knows, for defense contractors and aerospace leaders, ITAR compliance isn't just a regulated paperwork activity, it's a strategic imperative. And it's all about ensuring governance over your export, import of defense-related technical data, software services to protect the US national security. And that therefore brings on mandatory obligations for organizations. You need to perform an annual DTC registration and audit. You need to be registered for manufacturing, exporting of USML items, and ensure that you are, as Alban outlined earlier, ensuring that only US nationals have access to this data unless you have prior approval from the state. Yeah. There's a lot of controls around this. And we know that non-conformance has risks associated with this, of $1 million fines per incident, 20 years prison terms, and loss of export privileges. So it's got a major impact for businesses. Yeah. I think people may have heard in 2024 that Boeing agreed to a $51 million penalty just because of an unauthorized technical data being exported to China. So it's not a low value impact, this risk. It has major implications for businesses. Mm-hmm. So if I think about it from a SAP-driven organization that has ITAR control data within it, such as missile schematics and communication systems, compliance risks exist everywhere in every transaction you do, every user and the roles within the system, how the system is set up through configuration, and that therefore exposes businesses to the risk that unauthorized foreign access will occur by people who are not US citizens. You may have unauthorized data flows where you're exporting bill of materials via some external system like Ariba, and you have to have encrypted communication, make certain it's encrypted there. And you also, because of the annual audits, need to make certain you've got all of your audit trails in place with all the information to support it. Otherwise, that introduces risk. So those are some of the challenges with ITAR. So what are the things you need to think about from a data perspective? So I have a slide that summarizes that. So I think this is really not necessarily a data topic per se, but it's more in the architecture space. But obviously, Alban's talked about architecture, and I'll just close out on that one. Cybersecurity and having a cybersecurity practice is almost mandatory now, that it needs to have regular vulnerability management, code scanning for custom applications, secure transport controls, so that you are ensuring your system is protected and there are no unauthorized modifications being made. If I go into more of the data aspects, then obviously with ITAR, I've got to start to think about my data security practices, think about citizen-based authorizations being embedded into the SAP security roles. And also I think about how that maps into my HR systems. And when I'm transmitting data or moving data or holding data in the system, elements about data masking, who can see what and how can they see it. So these are all things that are, I'm going to say, very data-focused areas. SAP comes with the Global Trade Services solution, which is really about managing export compliance. And that helps to manage these export processes around and focus on compliance management, custom management risks. And so these is a great way of using the software to support your ITAR compliance, especially when you're doing external transactions. Awesome. But those are the general things. I generally say that there's a broader data management framework element to this one, and that you need to put in place. So Alban's talked about the architecture integration. We need to also think about the life cycle. So we need to talk about archiving and retention of data and how we do that in a secure way and who has access to it. We've also got to think about privacy and security. So we need to do some form of data classification so we understand what data is falling into those separate requirements. And the old adage of garbage in, garbage out still applies. If I've got bad data, then how do I know I'm going to be ITAR compliant if I've got bad data that's not necessarily being informed correctly? So it's important to get it clean, and as well, so we think about metadata management as a way of defining all these data, doing your classifications. So you've got a control on that one, then you can educate the people in the business around that one. Data quality management is obviously key to getting that data clean. But everything else is great getting it clean, but I've still got to ensure that I keep it clean. And this is not so much the data, it's also regulations change, new things come into play. So I always have to have the framework to be able to go back and say, what do I need to change and what are the business impacts from a data perspective? Are there extra controls, risks, etc. I need to manage? This is not just ITAR, but there are other controls, I'm sure, around rare minerals and precious metals and things like that that also come into play. So my general message is that, yes, ITAR is a critical compliance thing, but within everything, organization, architecture, you really need to think about putting a data management framework in place. So then any regulatory compliance reviews or changes of policy can be easily managed, putting that, reducing the risk of your business being in violation. So with that, I'll hand it back to you, Fanny.
Yeah. Thank you, David. Thank you for that thorough framework. As you can see, it's definitely a lot to consider, I think, and that's why I think it's such a important thing to have partners, right, to really kind of put that together. And as with everything, there's the technical, the data, the business side, but at the core of everything, it's also people, right? And when it comes to change management and user adoption, I think we definitely need to have a conversation around that. I would love to turn it over to Melissa. From your perspective, right? Tech and process might be ready, but people are not, right? Or they still need more direction or senior leadership. So in order to make sure projects don't fail, what prevents government contractors from typically adopting the technology, right? What change management and user adoption advice would you have, Melissa, so that as they embark on these projects, they consider the people side of things?
I love what you said, Fanny. People are really one of the most important parts of this endeavor that we go through with them and their journey. And I'm going to start with the first question, which is what prevents the government contractors from adopting tech? Well, being in government contracting for 20 years and then now working with a variety of different government contractors as a consultant, there tend to be some shared traits and a few cultural artifacts that we see again and again. Companies may not have any of these, they may have one or two, or they may share a number of these traits that I'm going to talk about. So one thing we see is a hierarchical org structures, very chain of command, resembling the military. They can be document heavy, really rely on and love their SOPs. They need to because of compliance concerns and compliance requirements. They're security driven. They come from a need to know. And so that really drives security. They have a formal communication style, both in the channels and in the way that they communicate. And that's often a cultural artifact we see. Organizations that work with the government a lot are risk averse. They need to be. They have to control costs. They have to be concerned with audit. And so they need things operationally to run very smoothly. They tend to have a training culture and make sure that training is repeated. And again, that can often be a compliance requirement. And then the two big ones I really want to highlight are they tend to have a lot of legacy systems because they're being careful with their overhead dollars, and a deep process entrenchment. We hear again and again, this is the way we've always done it. And they're relying on those processes to keep them compliant, to keep them operational. And so when you put that all together, we kind of see a couple of things. One is that leadership believes that top-down direction and that hierarchical org structure will be in place. And so there's really not a lot of required training and communication because we said this is how it's going to be. But in reality, there's often several challenges. One's buy-in. A lot of smart technical people working in these organizations and they feel that they know better. And so they're a little bit skeptical about buy-in. There's a need for thorough process review and thorough documentation, and that's because of the reliance on policies and procedures. And there tends to be a high level of fear of risk or failure, and even a feeling of lack of trust and transparency in communications, and even a distrust, an innate distrust in new systems. And so all those things together create somewhat of a change management challenge that we face often with government contractors. So what do we do about it? What advice do I have was your second part of the question. We really want to make sure that there's leadership alignment early. We have meetings, we ensure alignment, a united front for the organization. And then we want to align project goals to support the company mission, the client mission, compliance, and all of the business outcomes that are driving the need for the digital transformation in the first place. And this really can create a compelling reason to support the project to a successful conclusion. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, please continue. Yeah.
So then we want to create a very detailed communication plan and over-communicate by planning it early and constantly adding to it.
Yeah.
We build strong documentation and training assets. And then we want to show early wins wherever possible. So as we go through and work on a process, we want to implement little things early so people get a taste of what's to come. And then we like to use change champions, and this helps the communication channel. We can select a committee of people with high influence to inform teams and share with us what the word is out on the street and share with them what's really kind of going on behind the curtain with the ERP implementation. We treat project governance like a work stream to make sure there's really good rigor and documentation. And then one last thing that I really want to highlight, because I think this goes a long way, we have a really robust hypercare to bolster the system confidence. So making sure that, we're ready to answer questions, we can retrain, we have job aids, and we can provide quick fixes if anything comes up post-implementation, at go live that's creating any challenges operationally. And so just understanding the culture and then putting those stopgaps in place to create the best overall experience for people is really important for change management.
Yeah, I love that. You covered so many great things, Melissa. I was jotting down, that united front of the leadership, aligned goals, change champions, small wins, and so much more, right? So definitely important. So thank you for that, Melissa.
Of course.
And then with Ken, I know at Delaware, you guys have, in addition to all those things Melissa mentioned, right? At Delaware, we have a very robust, what we call human-centered transformation model, as well as learning academies. Can you talk a bit about that from your perspective?
Yeah, so everything Melissa talked about is super important and is part of our framework. I think the one thing that we really drive is that your value realization comes from adoption of the systems and the empowerment and the ownership that the organization takes around that ecosystem. So how do you do that? How do you ensure that happens as a integrated part of your transformation journey? We've developed an academy, which is a boot camp of exposing business process owners, subject matter experts, and the process teams, the business teams, to what the future system looks like. It increases their knowledge base for what's coming, and it reduces the barrier and resistance to change when we take them to the next stage, which is the explore phase, where you're pushing people through standard solutions, standard business processes, reference business processes, to move them away from custom solutions. So by increasing that knowledge base right out of the gate, you reduce those barriers, and you get a business team that's much more focused on that transformation aspects and really looking critically at their business processes as we go through the references. The second part we do is the empowerment and the ownership piece. We put an extreme emphasis on the business process owners and them taking accountability and ownership for their solutions and their systems for the future, and we get them hands-on keys as soon as possible. So we gradually turn up the engagement of them and throughout the life cycle, they start to do more of the showcasing to their business stakeholders and counterparts. They do active testing, and they build that knowledge and ownership and accountability for what they own as a value stream, progressively through the life cycle. And what we do is that we are really Sherpas helping them navigate that process, climbing up that steep hill, and gradually increasing their autonomy and accountability of what's coming. So then when we exit and go help someone else, they truly have adopted and own what they implemented through the cycle, instead of doing it to them and dropping it and leaving it. Right. So really focusing on adoption from the get-go.
I love that. Yeah, like Sherpas. That's a great analogy, Ken. Thank you. Yeah, and then I think this here is the Delaware diagram encompassing all those elements of the human-centered transformation. Do you want to give a quick highlight of some of those different areas, Ken?
Yeah, so it's really what Melissa was talking about. Is it focuses on the vision and the leadership, the accountability from the top down, having a clear roadmap for where you're going. It focuses in on communication, understanding your culture and your people, and how and what level of communication they need throughout the life cycle. And it focusing on having the right level of learning assets and learning approaches that is tailored to your organization. So if you're a back office worker, or if you're a shop floor worker, you have different training needs and different ways to absorb information and get proficient in how you're going to be operating in the future. So we have different learning styles and learning content that's tailored specifically to those needs. So those are all part of the framework that we start out with and build out and hand over to our customers.
Right. And I'm going to bring back Chad here, because like he said at the beginning, right, it's never just the technology and just the IT project. It's a whole encompassing business project, including the people, the process, the data, the tech, and all that. I want to kind of shift a little bit here and talk about case studies, right? Because obviously you all worked with a variety of clients and have very specific case studies. It always helps our audience to understand the concepts even deeper. Chad, you worked with a lot of M&A projects, right? Mergers and acquisitions, and as well as regulatory, pricing, audits, all those things that require tech restructuring. Right. And can you share a case study and kind of go at it from a challenges, solutions you guys put in, as well as the benefits that they realized?
Yeah, and as you know, maybe you'll remember this. I'm going to say something else, Fanny, that I always say, I've seen this movie 1,000 times. Which ending do you want? Right. And I think there's obviously a host of case studies, but I think the way to look at it, one of the things that when, especially in, you mentioned the M&A, right? And M&A has been rampant over the last few years. I think it's still going to continue as companies and, private equity is very much at the forefront of government contracting and buying up platform companies and things of that nature. But, there's, different approaches, right? Some are kind of, acquire and leave everybody alone. Some are, we're bringing you into our platform very quickly. Others, it's more strategic in terms of we're going to transition this over time. And I think, some of the just leave alone, right? And let them continue to operate their businesses. And you end up with multiple different silos, right? Within the organization. There's data constraints. There may be different systems. There's different reporting requirements. And what we're seeing, I think, in today's environment is, especially in the M&A market, right? You're buying adjacent technologies, right? You're not necessarily buying something that you've never necessarily done before. It's how do I add on and build, right, a larger solution offering to the client. And then when you try to, kind of merge all of that from a contracting perspective with disparate systems, across the board, that's very concerning. One of the things that and Ken probably feels the same way. It's, when we talk to organizations and they're like, we're going to let, our IT department is going to run this integration, right? And, he talked about the phase, that's like, oh gosh, I know how, now I know how this movie's going to end. But that kind of phase zero assessment, right? And I always say, within the regulatory environment, there's black and there's white and there's a whole lot of gray, right? And there's a lot of different ways to get solutions you need that may not just be as black and white. And so having that kind of external, like I said, we've seen this movie 1,000 times. We've seen a bunch of different endings, right? We can help you get the end, the happy ending, right? Not the negative ending. And bringing in advisors that have seen that is I think critical. The failures are typically from my experience is, this is our platform, you're coming into our platform, right? And there may be operational efficiencies, there may be cost efficiencies from that, but there could be a lot of different things because these different organizations are of different size. They have different regulatory requirements based on their contracts. They have different levels of complexity, and you end up forcing a lot of either the need for custom configuration, which is not cheap nor easily upgradable, right? You may have multiple different instances of cloud and cloud security, going on, and you oftentimes create more inefficiency through the need for manual processes and workarounds because of the mindset that I have to force fit you into the infrastructure that I have established that worked for the initial business I started with or the initial company that I was, but doesn't necessarily work for the larger company that I've become. So we really see it on, when it's, to restate something, and I told you I was going to say it again, running it as a business project and really identifying the business needs and putting in the timeline, talking about the change management that Melissa and Ken were addressing earlier, and getting some of those those champions involved, because that's absolutely critical. But I think where we've seen the most success is strategic, time phased, well thought out integrations and analysis versus just the acquire and jam in, acquire and jam in, acquire and jam in. And you actually, in many of those cases, we've seen those acquired businesses, there's actually more compliance risk that is created because of the belief that simply getting everybody, on the same system without addressing any changes to the system to meet different business needs of these different businesses, it actually creates more compliance issues, from a downstream perspective. So, I think there's it's not a lot of expense to get a second set of eyes to say, have you ever seen this done before, and what are the successful options, and what hasn't worked, because, and it was referenced I think in both Ken and Melissa's comments, there's a lot of when you're in the business and you've been in the business, you think in the business, you're not necessarily thinking outside of the business, or how do other people necessarily do this. And there's a lot of value in getting those insights to make these things successful, because if it's not done well, the cost to undo and redo becomes significant, and you get even more tech debt, to use Ken's term from earlier.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I just a sidetrack, I know Ken, sometimes Delaware's called in to fix failed implementations, right? Just
Yeah,
because it doesn't always, if it's not following a great approach, you have to fix it, and then it
Yeah.
stalls.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it's so crucial to use partners that really understand the industry and not aren't just order takers from the business. You need someone that can actually come in and push back and provide alternate perspectives. Otherwise, you're building yourself into the same corner, painting yourself into the same corner as you did 15 years ago with your.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, Ken, so from your perspective, you've obviously worked with tons of government contracting organizations as well. Can you share a case study or SAP project,
Yeah.
and share some of those, a use case from there?
Yeah, so I have a couple, and it's just to illustrate the difference lines of thinking. So we have a large global steel manufacturer operating in all continents of the world, who's also a pretty big government contractor, and they were deciding to do a greenfield, so a re-engineering of their business and transform, and really look carefully at not burdening their commercial side with the burden of government contracting policy controls and controls within the system. So they actually decided to do the hybrid landscape that Albin was talking about, which is they have a private cloud environment that is taking care of the regulated business, and then they have public cloud solutions for business entities that are low complexity manufacturing and more sales oriented organization. They do a ton of M&A activity. So they've adopted this hybrid landscapes of mixing a private cloud with a public cloud ecosystem, and then do financial consolidation, aggregation and consolidation into a core. A couple of other examples are GovCons where they have a commercial practice, and they've done a market analysis and said actually our growth potential in the commercial market is much bigger than the GovCon market. So we're actually gonna make sure we keep our core clean, and not from a technical customization perspective, but we're gonna keep our ITAR data outside the system. We're gonna keep our SAP system very clean. We're going to develop the controls for government contracting and the policy requirements outside of the SAP systems, and do our required reporting and compliance controls there, so that we don't build ourselves into a corner where our entire commercial expansion and commercial market is weighed down by our core system. And they are smaller, they're sort of mid-market players, $500 million revenue. And over time, they might deploy a hybrid type of tactic, like the larger global steel manufacturer that is in the tens of billions of dollars in revenue. So there's a couple of different variations, and it's really about taking a critical look at and really decomposing what you actually need and where your growth is going to come and to achieve your targets and goals.
Got it. Thank you for sharing that, Ken. And I just have a few more questions here, but I would invite the audience to submit any questions you have for our guest panelists. Before we wrap up, I'll bring all our panelists back in so that you have an opportunity to ask them any questions from all these different perspectives. So I want to, Chad, kind of have you wrap up a little bit, because you've said this in previous episodes, but for those that have missed it, right? Just getting away from that wait and see attitude, right? Obviously, there's tons of external factors that government contractors cannot control. It's totally out of their hands. And some of them are just doing that wait and see. But why is it so important that people and organizations get proactive and do something now during this kind of a bit of a turmoil?
Well, I think obviously when, I made the comment that, my crystal ball ran out of batteries when the new administration took office, right? And so, but I think we're past, in my mind, we're past that immediate level of uncertainty, right? Which was a lot of, just kind of a flurry, right, of executive orders and everything else coming out. And I think what's become somewhat clear, right, and there's still going to be changes that are happening, is that there's not really that much that's changing, right? And the push for commercial, let's buy more commercial, let's consider more commercial, right? That still has some compliance requirements to it, but that language has always existed in the regulations before. There's no revolutionary insert to say let's go do this. It's really the mindset and the change management that has been alluded to earlier of the government to actually execute on some of those things. So I think from a standpoint of wait and see, I don't know. There's not going to be that much that's I think going to be worth seeing, and I think wait and see is going to equal I just got left behind, right? Because there is there is going to be, I think, a continued kind of flurry of acquisition and speed to acquisition, right? That's been a big focus, and that's great. At the same time, I think there's going to be a continued flurry of acquisition from an M&A perspective, right? And bringing, more, adding on to the solutions, right, that companies are bringing to the table, and doing that in a siloed environment without investment creates a ton of risk, right? A ton of it was Dave was speaking to it earlier, data accessibility, data availability, data security, right? And so that investment, has to come, right? We've got the, as of, I think it was November 10th, the actual new CMMC rule, right? That's not going away. It's going to be, continue to be evaluated and implemented and upgraded, I think, from a requirements perspective. So, that initial kind of Q1, Q2 of 25, wait and see. I think everybody was in a little bit of paralyzation mode, but what we've seen has not been that different, right? And is not changing as much. And if continuing to, to wait on some of those things, in my mind, is just going to put you behind from, from an investment standpoint. And we're already seeing some of that with clients that have taken that approach. And now it's like, okay, now we need to hit the ground running. And the problem is, well, we want to keep the same, implementation timeline. We want to keep the same, we still want to be live at the end of Q1, but we haven't done anything for the last, 3 quarters, right? And all that's going to do is, create more risk and more challenges, right? When I'm trying to take a 12-month project and now do it in the next 6 months. So I think the time the time for upgrading, the time for investment, right? The time for assessing the changing business needs is here. I think there was this, all these regulations are going to go away. They're now we know that they're not, right? There may be different thresholds. Certain companies of certain sizes with certain contract values may not be subject to certain things, but nothing has gone away. So, and that's where I think of in talking with a lot of our clients and some of their executive teams. I think that's for those that may not be as experienced in the GovCon market, right? It's like, well, let's just sit on the sidelines for a minute because all this is going to go away, and I'm just going to contract with the government like I do everyone else in my commercial business. And it's like that's not going to happen. So I think that if your organization is at that kind of tipping point and tech investments, you got to make them and you got to move out.
Yeah. Thank you, Chad. And I'm going to kind of go around the table here, the virtual table here, and ask each of you to kind of maybe leave our audience with a key takeaway or a piece of advice from your perspective. I don't see any questions in our chat. Ken, I'll start with you, right? Maybe building on to what Chad just said, right? Getting out of that wait and see mode. Any key takeaway or advice you should tell folks right now? What can they do right now to kind of get things moving?
I once got a fortune cookie that says winning starts with beginning. So it's really we talked about phase zeros, and it's about getting started to understand what you actually should be doing, and starting to create a roadmap for where you need to go, and get some real target measures behind what your investments and what you should be achieving. Chad talked about the changing requirements. It's not really going to change. I think a lot of our customers in the space are fairly large enterprises that have had their positions pretty secure for decades, if not longer. And the reality is that I go to a lot of conventions and meetings and industry forums, and there's a lot of startup activity. And somewhere on the flank sits a little startup or a smaller company that's vying for your business, and they don't have that technical debt and the burden and the rigidity that you might be sitting at. So before you know it, there's someone coming left field that you didn't know existed and didn't exist. And you need to be able to put yourself in a position where you can be nimble and fast acting. So get started, understand your your organizational readiness, your technology readiness, and your process readiness, and start to derive those values and get going.
Yeah. Get those phase 0 assessments in for sure. Albin, I'd like to come to you. Any final key takeaways or advice from the technical architecture side?
Sure. So I think ultimately at the end of the day, it's really not, architecture is really not about where your servers are or how the connectivity works and so on. Like I kind of alluded to earlier, the hybrid model is really about the data, right? So data sensitivity is what really dictates the need for these, hybrid model. And again, kind of reiterating something that Chad said earlier about commercial data, making sure that they're clean and doesn't, come into the federal space and so on. If I were to just give one piece of advice, is really understanding where your data is, scoping it out and so on. And partners like us, Delaware and Capital Edge, can help you understand the sensitivity of those things and help segregate those data. And perhaps also at the same time, if you have reporting needs, we can help bring them back together in a aggregated or sanitized way for those reporting purposes.
Yeah. Thank you, Albin. Well, David, do you want to build on this conversation of data as well? Any final advice and key takeaways for our audience?
Yeah, it's good everybody keeps talking data. I mean, at the end of the day, data is the foundation of all the systems and everything that we do. I'm a big advocate of knowing how you're going to manage the data in your organization is really about that framework. Whether you're doing it today on your current platform, whether you're looking at it from a future perspective, you need to do it. You need to set that organization up. You need to make your organization a data-focused organization so they understand the value of it. They understand, certainly from an ITAR perspective, all the risks associated with it. So whether it's part of the phase 0 assessment that you do it, or even in advance of that, because it's relevant today, even before you start that transformational journey, my message is, think about your data management framework and think about putting it in place. It will hold you in good stead for the future.
100%. Thank you, David. And then last but not least, Melissa, I would love for you to close out with a piece of advice and key takeaway from your side, your perspective.
Sure. And thinking about, the confluence of people and process and technology, one thing that's coming along and you just don't want to be left behind by is AI and all the analytics and insights that can help propel your business forward and move much, much faster and create efficiencies. And so, if none of the other things that we've said were compelling enough reasons to get started now, I think not being left behind by technology because everyone else is utilizing it is really critical.
Yeah, such a good point, Melissa. It's like you can't hop on the AI bandwagon if everything else is not in good shape, right?
Exactly.
Then you're just building on a very weak foundation. Yeah. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Ken, Chad, David, Albin, Melissa. Thank you to all of you in the audience for tuning in. This episode will be immediately available for replay, so you can always watch this back anytime that you'd like. I'm going to kind of go through and pull up each person's QR code here so that anybody in the audience can connect with everyone. Everyone's full names are there, so please reach out, connect with them on LinkedIn. Let's pull up Ken Berg's QR code real quick. So anybody that wants to connect there with him, let's pull that up. And then that's Ken Berg, partner at Delaware. And then moving over to Chad Braley, CEO at Capital Edge. Feel free to connect with him as well. That's his QR code to LinkedIn. And then David Sentence, and then Data SME at Delaware, and then Albin Leung, our tech architect, principal architect at Delaware, and then Melissa Dixon, senior manager at Capital Edge. So be sure to connect with everybody, and I'm going to wrap it up here. And as we kind of wrap up the show, I'm going to play for you our corporate video about Delaware, giving you a bit about their background. And we'll see you next time or on a replay. Thanks, everyone.
Everyone.
Thanks, Fanny.